we're not too sure. It doesn't tell us where they are exactly, so that's why there's a slash. So it could be Webb or Yates in this position, and it could be Webb or Yates in this position. Now, your answer has to be correct for whether Webb or Yates is here or here. Okay, you can't. There's two possible options now for that Q, and it has to be correct for both. So the correct answer in this case would be Mrs. Wolfman is standing between Mr. Webb and Yates, because no matter if Webb or Yates is here or here, that answer would still be correct, even if you swap them out. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Right, so let's go on to another question. So that's a logic puzzle. These can be a little bit tricky, and it does take some time, and often they take more than a minute just to solve. So don't worry if you didn't have enough time to solve. It does take a bit of practice. We're now going to have a look at a 5-part question. So 5-part questions can be quite tricky too, and they often take more than a minute again. So you'll be given some information. Often it could be data, or it could be a short bit of information, and then you'll have something that looks like this. So it'll be 5 boxes which have statements in them, and within the 5 boxes next to them, you have to either drag a yes or a no. So let's just do a few. We won't do all of them because of time, but let's just do the first 3. So country Y and country Z generated 187 terawatt hours of electricity from renewable sources in year 10. So quite a bit of information. Okay, now I'm going to take that away because obviously to show you guys a pie chart. So first of all, year 1 and year 10. So we're looking at these 2 pie charts here, this one and then this one. So country Y and Z. We're also looking at renewable sources, which is the dashed line. Okay, so it's this one here, 7% and 20%. But these percentages are of the total electricity produced, which is at the top. So you have to do a bit of maths. You do need to use your calculator, which would be the on-screen calculator. Again, can be quite tricky to use, which is why practicing these questions is so important before your test day. So what we would have to do is work out 20% of 375. Some of you can do that in your own time as you want. I'll give you guys about 15 seconds to do that actually, just to give you a taste of what it would be like on test day. So someone's just asked a question if you're allowed to use a calculator in the exam. So yes, you can, but it's an on-screen calculator. So if you go onto the UCAT website, there's some official past question papers, and you can see what the format is like. So it's an on-screen calculator, which you have to use your mouse, or you can type on the keyboard and you can use it, but you can't take in a physical calculator. Right, so 20% of 375 is 75 terawatts hours, and then 7% of 1600 adds up to about 112. So if you add those two together, the answer is 187. That's a yes. It's because it's correct. Now the second one, both countries decreased the amount of electricity generated from coal over the 10-year period. So let's go back, have a look. So country Y and then country Y from year 1 to year 10. So let's have a look at coal, which is the second bit. It's a little bit grey. Again, I'm sorry, it's a little bit difficult to see because of how small the pie charts are. But 24%, and we go to 22%. So you may think that we are going down, but realize that at the top, the total, what the pie chart represents, does go up. So again, you would have to do some maths, which again takes some time. Okay, so if you did the maths, you would realize that it doesn't actually go down. It actually goes up despite the smaller percentage. So that question straight away is incorrect. Okay, right, let's go on to the third one. Just the last one that we're going to do. I've already given you guys the answer. But basically, fossil fuels accounted for a greater percentage of country-wide electricity generated in year 10 than in year 1. So this question is a little bit tricky because now you need to determine what fossil fuel is. And notice how there's some information at the bottom. So fossil fuels include natural gas, coal, and oil, which would be this section, and this. Okay, so you kind of have to eyeball. This question you can actually eyeball. What I mean by that is you don't actually have to work out the maths. What you need to do is just work out kind of like how much of the pie chart it's covering. So let's just have another look at the question. Fossil fuels accounted for a greater percentage of country-wide electricity generated in year 10 than in year 1. So in year 10, we have almost about half the pie chart, whereas in year 1, it's way more than half. So that's also incorrect. That's a no. Right, so I'm not going to do the last two, but what I wanted to show you guys is that these questions can take a lot of time, way more than a minute. So sometimes a good thing to do would be to basically do the other easier questions first and then come to the 5-part questions. Same with the logic puzzles. And you know, once you start prepping, obviously because of time, I can't show you all the different types of questions. But sometimes it's better to do the easier questions first because remember, all the questions are worth 1 mark. Right, let's go to quantitative reasoning, which is the next section, section 3, and you'll have 9 data sets Think of it quite similar to verbal reasoning. You know how you've got a passage and then 4 questions. In this case, you'll have a data set, which will be either a paragraph or some text, or in most cases, it'll be data, so graph or a table or something like that. And you'll have 4 questions on each based on that, and then you'll get 24 minutes to answer those questions. Try and spend no more than 30 seconds. So let's go on to the first question. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds whilst I read some of your questions. So try and do this question for me. Okay, so your 30 seconds are up. I'm just going to put a poll in the middle of the screen. For any of you, if you're getting a black screen, that's because it's a live session. So your internet connection may drop, in which case just refresh the page and you would join in again. So if that's happening to you, please do that and you should be fine. Right, so have a go at answering this question. I'm going to give it 5 more seconds for you guys to put some answers down, and then we will go through the question. So with quantitative reasoning, it's a great idea to start with the question itself. So ignore the data and go straight to the question. So first of all, how much did Leicester sales team sell in 2012? Okay, so 2012, if you look at the title of the graph, it says Leicester sales team. Okay, and these are the different people that are selling, and we are at 2012. So this is what is called identifying the target. You're trying to get to the information on the data which you need. Now, this question can be a little bit tricky, but it's actually quite simple. It's just long. What you have to do is add up all the different bars. Okay, so it's 170 plus 130 plus 225, 240, and so on. And the answer comes up to 1300. Now, if you look here, the two A and E look quite similar. So you may have to go back and read the information at the top. You don't always have to, but if you're stuck, then you may have to. So sales figure are given in thousands of pounds. So it's 1.3 million pounds, basically. So answer E is correct. Right, let's go on the next question. Again, I will give you guys 30 seconds for this. Okay, and that is 30 seconds up. So let's just give you guys a poll for 10 seconds for you guys to answer. Okay, so again, getting a few mixed answers between A, B, and C. So this question can be a little bit tricky the way it's worded. So first of all, we want to go to Woodcock sales 2010 and 2011. So if we have a look, in 2010, Woodcock sale was about 220,000, right? And then in 2011, it reduced to 180,000 based on the information that you're given. So it's the last one here and then this one here. Now, you would be using a formula, and you can write this down if you like. It is, so percentage change is the first one, equals difference, so the difference between the two, divided by the original. Now, a lot of students get confused at, so when I teach this in class, a lot of students get confused between what is the original. The difference is pretty easy, you just take one away from the other. The original is whatever you're comparing it to. So in this case, we're comparing it to the 2011 figure. Sorry, the original, so 2010 figure, because that's what was at the beginning. And that is 222,000. So 40,000, the difference, divided by 220,000 gives you 0.182. A lot of students also, I see this in class all the time, a lot of students then try to multiply that by 100. Remember, that's waste time. What you can do, just get in the habit of seeing a decimal and converting it to a fraction, to a percentage straight away. So 0.182 is around 18%. So that's the answer. A is the correct answer. We're just going to speed up a little bit as we're running a little bit behind. So let's go on to the next question. Question number 6, I will give you guys 30 seconds for this. Right, so let's go through this question. So how long is the fast train journey from Cheshire to London? So we're going from here, and if you read some of the information that is given to you, it says the fast train calling only at London, so it basically doesn't stop at any other stations. So first thing you want to do is add up the distances: 16.9 miles, 5.3, and then 2.8. Notice how we haven't even read this information yet, because a lot of the time the UCAT questions will give you unnecessary amount of data that you don't need all of it. So save yourself the time, only read the data that you definitely need, and you would know that if you get stuck. So we're going to add up the different datas, and the different distances, and that gives you 25 miles. We know from the first bullet point that the average speed is 40 miles per hour. So this is a simple speed equals distance over time question, and you can rearrange that for time, and you can do 25 miles divided by 40 miles per hour. It gives you 0.65 hours. But the answers are in minutes. So the final step is to multiply that by 60. So 0.65 times by 60 would give you 38 minutes as your answer. Right. So let's have a look at another question from the same kind of data set. And I'll give you guys about 10 seconds just to read the question. Okay, so at 10:08 a.m. a train departs aimlessly for London. At the same time, train, not a fast train, departs from Cheshire for London. Which train will arrive at London Marylebone first? So this question, you can just tell straight away, it's so much more complicated than the ones before. Now in the UCAT, there will be a lot of questions that are pretty straightforward. You can do them in the time that's allocated to you. But every now and then you'll come across a question that's a bit too difficult. Okay, so that's the kind of question, the perfect thing to do here would be just to guess, flag, and move on. Okay, so you have a flagging option where you can flag a question and you can come back to it later if you have time. Now remember, like I said before, every question is worth 1 mark. So there's an exception to decision making, but we'll come back to that later. So every question is worth 1 mark, and therefore do the easy ones first. If something is too complicated, don't get bogged down by that. Try and triage your questions, do the easy ones first. Right, let's have a look at this last maths question. So quantitative reasoning, I'll give you guys 30 seconds for this. Right, so let's go through them. So this question, it tells you that, so let's read the question, what is the length of one of the diagonal paths? We are told that this park is 350 meters on all sides. So it's a square. It's a square of 350 meters. And this would be a perfect opportunity for you guys to have your noteboard, draw a square, draw a diagonal, and you would be able to see this is basically Pythagoras that you're doing. So one thing you want to do is find the square root of both the square sides. So 350 square plus 350 squared, and find the square root of that. You would do that in your calculators, and the answer comes to 495. Again, not too bad at all. Right, guys, so that is the quantitative reasoning section done as well, just to give you guys a feeling of what kind of questions can come up. So the third section, quantitative reasoning, is mostly maths. We're now going to go on to a section that a lot of students really fear, the abstract reasoning, because this is the most unusual one. A lot of you wouldn't have really seen anything quite like it, before in school. So you will have 11 sets of shapes, with most of them will have 5 test shapes per set. And you'll have 13 minutes only to do this section. It's one of the shortest sections, goes really quick. And try and spend 1 minute per set. Now even that, that seems really quick, but the idea is try and work out the pattern in the set. So this is what it would look like. So you'll have set A and B, okay? But obviously to save space, we've done all 5 of them on one page. On test day, you would get 1 per page, okay? And then you would click next. Set A and B will stay where they are, just the test shapes will change, and I'll show you how in a second. Anyway, what I'm going to give you is 30 seconds. Try and work out the pattern in set A and B. Ignore the test shapes, don't even look at them. Just focus on set A and B, try and work out the pattern. What is the similarity in each set? 30 seconds. So just to answer a few questions in the chat, no. So the UCAT is a black and white exam, and yeah, timing is an issue. Again, with practice, you will get better and better, and also with timing, with practice you'll find how to focus your time on some of the right ways to do it. So often you don't have to find all the different things about a particular data set. You might only need to find a few things. Anyway, let's go through this. So I'm sure some of you found the pattern, some of you wouldn't have. This is a hard one. So looking at set A, if you look at the arrows, all the arrows in set A and B, they point to the top right corner. So that's the first thing. That's the first part of the pattern. The second part is that the arrows in set A all point to the corner of the shape. If you look, so they all point to the corner shape, whereas in set B, they point to the edges of the shapes. So even the circle, that's the edge. And that is pretty much it, right? So arrow points at the corner of a large shape, arrow points at the side of the large shape. And now let's have a look at the test shape 1. So test shape 1, we've got arrow pointing to the top right, so that's good, and it's pointing to the edge, so that must be B. Okay. Have a look at the next one. So in B, straight away we can see this is odd, isn't it? It would not fit into either A or B because it's just pointing up. That does not fit the pattern, therefore it must be neither. Option number 3 is pointing to the top right corner, kind of, which is good, and it's pointing to the corner of the shape, which means it must be A. Option number 4, again, pointing in the right direction and to the corner, so it must be A. And then finally, pointing in the right direction and towards the edge of the shape, so therefore that one is B. So that's it. Thing is, once you get the pattern, just try and spend most of your time of that 1 minute, about 30 seconds or so, to get the pattern. If you get the pattern, great. If you don't, just guess the answers anyway and move on as quickly as you can. Often students spend way too much time if they can't get the pattern, and they try to really force it to get the pattern, and it just wastes too much time. So I'm going to give you guys another 30 seconds for this question, and you can type in the box if you like to tell me what the pattern is. Okay, so we're just going to go through. So that's what 30 seconds is. Again, very short amount of time. So first thing you want to ask yourself is, you've got 4 shapes in each box. Do some of the shapes keep coming back every time? So if you look at set A, there's always a pointy star, a 4-pointer star. And then you also have always 2 triangles. So set A, there's always 2 triangles and a 4-pointer star. And then in set B, you've got 2 trapeziums and an oval every time. There's a bit more to it. So this is a partial pattern. There's a little bit more to it. Some of you may not have got the second bit. So the top left shape in A, it's black every time. So in each box, top left is black. Here. And in B, the top right shape in each box is always black. So that is the full pattern written underneath there. Some students may not have got both bits, but as long as you have some of that, you would be able to get at least 3 or 4 marks. If you had both, you would get all the marks. So question number 6, we have 2 trapeziums and an oval, but the top right shape is not black, so this must be neither. Because if the top right shape, if that was black, it would have been B, but it's not, so therefore we have to say neither. In this case, again, we've got 2 trapeziums and an oval, and the top right shape is black, so that is B. That's what a pattern fits, set B. Question number 8, you've got 2 triangles and a 4-pointer star, but this should have been black to fit A. It's not, it's white. So therefore this is neither as well. And then question number 9, you've got 2 triangles and a 4-pointer star, and this time the top left shape is black. So this fits A. And then finally, question number 10, you've got 2 trapeziums and an oval, and the top right shape is black. So that fits B perfectly. Make this a little bit smaller. Right, so that is abstract reasoning. Now we're going to go into situational judgment. This section, as I told you guys earlier, is scored slightly differently. So it's no longer scored out of 900. You get a band. So band 1 to, so if you get a higher band, so band 1 to 4. If you get a higher band, that's good. That's amazing. Most students tend to get about band 1 or 2. So as long as you get that, that's good. 3 and 4 are not so good. The majority of the students, like I said, manage to get band 1 and 2 if their ethics are good. So this section is basically ethics. You'll be given a scenario, and then you'll be asked some questions based on the scenario as to what you would do, or what's appropriate and what's not so appropriate. So you'll have 29 scenarios. Sorry, this is supposed to say 29 scenarios, and you'll have about 69 questions. between 3 to 6 questions for each little scenario. And you'll have 26 minutes. So again, try and aim for about 30 seconds to read the scenario. So read the scenario first, and then about 10 seconds each to answer each question. So what I'm going to do, give you guys 30 seconds to read the scenario and about 10 seconds. So I'll give you 50 seconds in total, and write down on a piece of paper what you think the answers are. Okay, so for question number 1, please just mark the answers you think is correct for question 1 only, and then we'll go through that, and then I'll restart the poll, and then I'll do question 2. So a lot of you are saying B. Let me show you guys what everyone is thinking at the moment. So majority of you are saying B. Just stick with your gut instinct. Right, getting a lot of answers. Good. Okay, so in this section, you may have noticed reading the scenario and the question doesn't actually take that long. Verbal reasoning was a little bit tougher because there's so much to read. Here, it is possible to read the whole thing, and I would advise you to read the scenario first and then go to the question. So, question number 1, tell Mrs. Hughes that if she continues to make racist remarks, she may be asked to leave the hospital immediately. Okay, this is a very inappropriate answer. So 15 of you got that correct. It's a very inappropriate thing to do. The reason is you don't want to escalate the situation. Some patients may be rude, some patients may be racist, but it doesn't mean you treat them any differently. You try to address it if you can in a nice, calm manner. Threatening the patient that they may be asked to leave the hospital is only going to escalate the problem. So it's a very inappropriate thing to do. Right, I'm going to ask you guys to put your answers down for question number 2. Ask Mrs. Hughes if she would like a second opinion from another doctor. And most of you are saying either a very appropriate thing to do or a appropriate thing to do, but not ideal. Okay, so let's move that away. Right, so in this case, the correct answer is B. Now, let me tell you guys why. So first of all, offering your patient that alternative. So because if you've already started on a bad foot, the doctor-patient relationship might not be as great. So offering the patient the option of having a second doctor is reasonable. It's appropriate. So that's the first thing. It is appropriate. The reason it's not ideal is because then you have to go and find another doctor. It takes away the other doctor's time, kind of stops you from learning as well, so that there are some consequences. So that's the kind of things you should think about. First thing, it is appropriate. It's a good thing to do, but there are mitigated factors. Right, let's have a look at another different type of scenario. It's the same scenario, 3 more questions on the scenario. I'll give you guys 30 seconds to answer all 3. Go for it. Okay, I'm going to stop you guys there. So for the first one, question number 3, just have a go at the poll whilst I read the question. So ask Mrs. Hughes if she has a question about her diagnosis, the recommended surgery, or both. And pretty much all of you are saying A, a very appropriate thing to do. Yeah, that is exactly what you would do. Kind of change the subject over, ignore the fact that she's been racist, and just move it on to providing really good patient care. Question number 4, call the police to report Mrs. Hughes as her racist remarks are a public order offence. What do you guys think about that? Just another few seconds to get the poll. So yeah, again, well done. Most of you saying it's a very inappropriate thing to do, and it is. So that would only, again, it's a threat. It would make the situation worse. And for question number 5, have a go at answering the poll, please. So excuse herself immediately from Mrs. Hughes and seek out support from a senior colleague. And again, well done. Majority of you saying C. So yeah, it is inappropriate, but it's not awful. So it's inappropriate because you don't want to just leave the patient there and then. You're there to provide care to the patient. So if you just, because of one comment, if you're going to leave the patient there, not the best thing to do as a doctor. And then obviously but the second bit, seek support from a senior colleague, that's not such a bad idea. And that's what makes it C instead of D. So it's inappropriate, but not awful. It's not, if that comment really offended you, then maybe that's a good thing. But majority of the time, some patients can be rude, depending on whatever reasons. It doesn't mean you should stop providing that patient care that they need. So this is C, and majority of you got that correct. So well done. Right, we're going to look at a different type of scenario now. So these questions are importance questions. So read the second bit here. It says, how important to take into account are the following considerations for Bola when deciding how to respond to the situation? And I'm going to give you guys the questions in a second. So let me give you guys 30 seconds to the scenario and then 10 seconds each for the question. So I'll give you about a minute in total. Okay, so that's a minute over. Let me give you guys the poll for question number 10. So there's some problems here again. The doctor wants to leave early because of a concert that she would like to go to. So how important is it that doctors are required to update their patient notes and should not leave the hospital until they've done so? 97% of you saying that is very important, and you're right, it is. Patient care comes first, regardless of whatever. Now, how important is it that Tilly is her best friend? Some of these ethical scenarios are amazing. They're so funny. I'll give you guys about 5 seconds to answer that. So majority of you are on the right track. So with this section, I also wanted to mention, you'll get 1 whole mark if you get the correct answer, and you also get partial marks as long as you're on the right side. So usually the split is A or B, those are like important things, and C and D are not important. So as long as you're on the right side, you will get some partial marks. In this case, the correct answer is D. It's not important at all. Reason being, doctor-patient relationship and the care that you're providing, that comes first. Regardless of whether this person is your best friend or not, your main role as a doctor is to provide good medical care to your patients, and at expense of everything else in your personal life. That's essentially is what being a doctor is all about. Right, question number 12 and 13, I will give you guys 20 seconds, so 10 seconds each for each question. So 20 seconds in total. Go for it. Okay, so let's go through question number 12. I'm just going to give you guys a poll. So how important is it that the concert tickets were expensive? Again, majority of you on the right track. Yeah, not important at all. It doesn't matter how expensive they were. They could be thousands of pounds, but you know what? Patient care, again, comes first. Think of the situation judgment test as things that you should do rather than you would do. So a lot of the times, personally, some people are like, I really want to go to the concert, but at the same time, you should stay and look after your patients. And then question number 13, how important is it whether this is the first time that Tilly has failed to do a proper handover at the end of a shift? Okay, very even split with this one actually, again, because it is quite difficult. So these kind of questions, some of the really big ethical dilemmas can be quite tricky. So in this case, let me just tell you guys the correct answer is of minor importance. The reason is we don't actually know how many times she's done it before. Maybe if it's the second time that she's done it, yeah, it's bad, or if that's just a habit. So whether or not this is the first time or not, it's not an appropriate thing to do. So you should always do a proper handover before leaving the hospital. So that is the end of the UKCAT 5 sections that we're going to do. I'm just going to give you guys a bit of information about how to prepare. I know a lot of you guys will ask me questions about what is the best method to prepare for the UCAT and when you should start preparation and things like that. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about that a little bit. Just some services that we offer here at Kaplan. So one of the most popular things is the 2-day UKCAT classroom courses. There are varying number of days and all sorts of things. So I'm just going to talk to you guys about that a little bit. So the course is available from June all the way till September, till the end of September. You can have a 2-day course, a 1-day course, some of the 4-day courses. There's also a 5-day course now that we're starting this year. And what we do is it's a small number of students in a classroom, and we give you techniques. So some of you were asking, what are the different ways that you can pick up the pattern? So it's things like that. We'll give you the techniques that you need to score higher. And then all the teachers that work at Kaplan scored within the first decile when they did their UKCAT. Some are doctors, some are medical students, and that's what the teachers are. And it's a very interactive classroom. There's all sorts of communication between the students and the teacher. And also we do online courses as well for those of you who, the Kaplan course is not coming to your city. Majority of the time we go all over the UK. So there's online classes similar to this, but because I've got 100 students here, I can't focus on every single comment. But the online classes that we do, it is more of an interaction with the students. They can ask questions and those will be answered straight away from the teacher on screen. There's also self-study or private tutoring options as well. Check out the Kaplan website to see what else is there. So within the course material that you would buy, you can get 10 video lessons, you get a strategy book, you get a lesson ebook, online study center which has loads of questions. So you get 6 full-length practice tests, you get 500 practice questions, and 30 section-focused quizzes. And then you get the Future Doctors channel, which is amazing. Every week, once or twice, one of the Kaplan teachers or one of the doctors would come on a live session like this, and they would talk about different things like, getting into med school, what med school is like, what being a doctor is like, even dental school, and then just different things, personal statement, all sorts of things. And you'll have access till the UCAS deadline. So the UKCAT question bank you can also buy, which has more than 2,500 questions, 3 full-length practice tests, and then customizable quizzes. And you can also trial this out. So on the Kaplan website, if you go under UCAT, you'll be able to see question bank trial. So definitely sign up for that so you can get some free questions to look at. We also do interview and MMI preparation. So it's a 1-day course. Courses run from October to January, and London, Birmingham, and Manchester, and each course is provided by a doctor and medical students as well. And there's also mock 1-to-1 interview and MMI sessions too. So you get ongoing teacher support throughout your preparation and whenever you need until the UCAS deadline. So thank you very much for listening. What I'll do now is, since I finished 6 minutes early before April comes on and she talks to you guys about work experience that medical projects offer. So if you have any questions, type them in the box and I'll try to answer them. So try and make them fun and personal if you want, what med school is like. So I'm at Bart's final year. So if you have any questions about that or any questions about UCAT. So speaking another language in the workplace is actually very useful. So I myself can speak 3 different languages, English, as I'm speaking now, Urdu and Punjabi as well. So being in East London, that has come in very handy. There's been numerous times where language barrier was an issue. So speaking different languages is definitely a good thing. It's something that you can mention in your interview, even in your personal statement if you like. How exactly do you take this test? So this test is a computer-based exam. So you would sign up, as I was telling you guys at the beginning, you would sign up on the UCAT website, get a date, and you go into this test center. So I don't know if you guys have done your driving theory test. It's the exact same center there. And you basically sit in front of a computer for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours if you have extended time, and you go through each section as we did, depending on how long the sections are, and you answer those questions. And then Do universities focus on GCSE? Yeah, so universities do. So depending on what universities you apply, so there's about 30 or so, more than 30 now, that do medicine and dentistry. So depending on which university you apply, every university is different, so I can't give you the general information regarding that. Every university looks at different things. The best thing to do would be go on their website, get the email address, contact them, and ask them what is it exactly that they look at. But majority of the time, they would look at your GCSEs. So how important, so this is a question, again, April's going to talk to you guys a lot about work experience, but yeah, work experience is one of the most important things. So definitely start getting some now. If you guys are applying for 2020 entry, which most of you will be, start getting work experience now. I'm not going to touch on that too much because April's going to be talking about that a lot. But yeah, it is very important, and most people get a few weeks within different fields. So dentistry is mainly UKCAT for majority of the universities rather than BMAT. And do we get a paper to do working? So you would get it's like a laminated piece of A4, and within that document you can basically make notes and stuff. And yeah, so you can just draw stuff or write questions. Okay, what other questions are there? So the PowerPoint and so not the PowerPoint, but the actual recording will be emailed to you guys later on for you guys to have a look at. So the calculator question again. So with the UCAT, yes, you would get a calculator, but it's on screen. So it's something that you have to practice using. It's not a physical calculator. You can't take one in. You would have to use a calculator that is given to you on screen. Do you take the exam with people? Yeah, so there could be, depending on your center, there would be other people within the room as well. But it's very quiet, super quiet. You even get earplugs if you want to just study your exam or do your exam in nice and peace and quiet. So if you get a bad score in the UCAT or the BMAT, yeah, so unfortunately the resit is not in the same year. You would have to apply again the following year if you get a bad score. So there isn't such a list for assumed GCSE maths knowledge for the UCAT. But there are a few topics, things like fractions, percentages, ratios, Pythagoras, probabilities. These things are stuff that comes up again and again and again. So maybe you revise that stuff if you're not doing a maths A-level. I like how someone's typed the answer in capitals so it gets focused. So with scholarships for international students, it's not something I know too much, but maybe April can help you guys with that. So what GCSE and A-level grades did you achieve? Not trying to show off, but I had 9 A stars and 2 A's at GCSE, and again 2 A stars and 2 A's at A-level. But again, you don't have to get as high as that. Some people do even better, but I know a lot of students who had things like 2 A stars and a certain number of A's at A-levels, and even just 3 A's for most unis. That's pretty good. Okay. So the UKCAT exists because it's very difficult for universities to select the number of students because there's just so many applications. I think last year was something like 60,000 applications, ridiculous number. So to narrow it down, they have to have an additional test where students will be able to be selected for interview because they can't interview every single student. I'm just going to do a few more questions, maybe 2 more before we give the room to April to come on and give you guys a talk about work experience. Okay, so the situation judgment test and getting partial marks in terms of some of the questions that you would get. So the way the situation judgment test is marked is they get like a room full of doctors, nurses, medical students, and they give them the question that I gave you, for example, and everyone would mark that option that they would do because it's ethics. If you can argue your point, any one of those answers could be correct depending on how well you can argue it. So the one that gets the most number of votes gets 1 full mark. And the one that's next highest number of votes gets like a partial mark. I don't know exactly what the partial mark is, if it's half, if it's 0.4 or whatever, but there are some marks like that. Does Oxbridge look at UCAT scores? No, Oxbridge looks at BMAT. And then final question, is there any point in doing an A-level for a year, then dropping it? So this is, again, I get asked this all the time. So for example, AS level, so you guys would do AS first and then A2. So most people start with 4 AS levels or 5, and then you can drop 1 and go to 3 A levels. Most universities, depending on the university that you're applying to, make sure you look at that application process now. Most universities just want three, 3 A's, or places like Oxbridge or UCL Imperial want 1 A star and 2 A's. So it is up to you because A2 is a big jump from AS. Okay, so if you think that there's a subject, for example, I did 3 sciences and maths, so I did biology, chemistry, physics, and maths. And then what I did was instead of dropping my subject, I just carried on all four, which was a bit hectic. It was quite tricky, but I was okay. Majority of my friends, they did drop one, so some of them just dropped maths or physics. Because a lot of the universities do want biology and chemistry. So it's worth having a think about that and how your workload is going to increase. And especially now for you guys, whereas for me, my exams were split over AS. I did half my exams in the first year and then half my exams in the second year. Whereas for most of you, all your exams are going to be at the end. So that's another thing to think about. There's no right or wrong way. Obviously, if you have 4A levels that you're offering, it's more competitive, but at the same time, you have more work. Right, guys, thank you very much for joining the UCAT talk. And I will now hand over the camera and the presentation to April. He's going to talk to you guys about work experience. I'm going to be back here around 7 p.m. giving you guys a talk about BMAT, and then there'll be another question and answer session after that. So please do stay for that. But thank you very much. And yeah, good luck with the UCAT exam.
Okay, hi guys. I'm April, and let me just get up my presentation. So I'm April. I'm an I say an FY3 doctor. I've been qualified from medical school about 3 years now. So I've done 5 years of medical school. So I did all my training in Manchester University, and hold on, I think some people can't see my screen. Make sure. Everyone see me now? Sorry, I'm not the best with technology. So oh, great. Okay, yeah. So I'm April, so now you can see my face. Yeah, so I've done 5 years of Manchester Medical School, and then I've done my foundation year 1, foundation year 2, actually in Newcastle. I moved up north, and now I've taken a year out of training before I specialise to do things like this. So I work with medical projects, helping students with work experience and advice on personal statements, interviews, and I love it. I work part of my time here and then part of my time in A&E. I work around the northeast in A&E and I love it. Okay, so right. So let's talk about work experience. I'll try and get through about 20 minutes of slides, as much information as I can get to you guys, and then we'll do about 10 minutes of like a kind of solid Q&A session, just like I was doing. Okay? Right. So yes, I've already told you about like technology. I love a good meme, so I'll be fitting them in throughout the slide. So yeah, it sounds strange that before you actually get to do experience through medical school, that you have to have work experience. You probably kind of think, oh, why sometimes, but we'll go through why. We'll go through why universities look for it, and what types, and then kind of how to actually kind of get it there as well. Okay. Right. Okay, so why do you actually need work experience? I'm going to focus on you yourselves. Actually, why you think that you need work experience and what makes it so important. Okay. So there's many reasons for you to actually do it. It's not just for your UCAS statement, okay? The key word here we're looking for is basically you're trying to get this realistic work experience, okay? The word realistic is really key because you're only going to find out what work life is like, what work as a student is like, work as a doctor is like, just by experiencing it, okay? So you'll only be able to see what it's like, talk to a variety of healthcare professionals. You need to know actually whether medicine is right for you as a career. It's 5 or 6 years that you're going to be studying it, okay? You need to know whether that's the career that you want to do and at least have a good insight in what you want to do. What you need to know what you're getting yourself in for. I'm sure you know that it's not always an easy job. You need to know what the downsides are, you need to know what the positives are, and then you can actually make an educated choice and say, yes, I want to be a doctor. This is the right choice for me. And yeah, obviously, you need it for your university applications, okay? Right, so I know some of you might be feeling like this. I've seen a few questions already when Bacta was talking. Yeah, it seems like a minefield sometimes, work experience, especially what you think universities might want, what types of work experience, how much, what you should be writing in your personal statement about it, what you need to be saying in your interview. But hopefully we'll cover a few things here as well, okay? Right, so why do universities look for it? Okay, I mentioned this actual word realistic at the start. They need to know that you know what being a medical student is like, what a doctor is like, okay, and that you actually know what you're getting yourself in for. You know, you need to know what the National Health Service is like. You need to know what the day-to-day job of a doctor is like. You need to know that you have to come home one evening and relax and de-stress. You know, you might have had a really hectic day and you need to, go to the gym just to de-stress or go out for a meal with one of your friends. There's, a variety of reasons why they actually look for it, okay? So, they are looking for two main things. They are looking for your commitment to study medicine. As I've said, and I'm sure you guys know, that when you are studying medical school, it's 5 or 6 years, okay? It's a long time. And then after that, it takes you years before you become even a consultant, okay? Um, Give me 2 seconds. I've just had a question about sharing my screen. Hold on, fraction of a second. I know some of you tried to get through, but that's fine. Don't worry. Sorting the issue. Okay, so they're looking for this commitment to study medicine. Okay, they're looking for whether you thought that you truly understand what a hospital's like. Okay, and you need to have that understanding of what a GP is like, a care home is like. Okay. Well, I've highlighted these words new skills in yourself, okay? Universities really like this keyword of reflection. They like you to understand what you've learned from your work experience, whether you've learned to be a better leader or whether you've learned better communication. Have you learned about yourself as a person? Have you got good empathy? Okay, they really enjoy the reflection side of things, mainly far more than actually the experience itself. Okay. So types of work experience. There's loads and loads of types of work experience. I've put shadowing at the top because I think most people think that's what they need. Actually, far fewer UK universities are looking for that nowadays because they know that it's harder and harder to get shadowing work experience with doctors. They know busy lives, busy hospitals, budget cuts, health and safety. Okay, universities are aware of that. That's why there's a couple of other roles as well that you can go down and other different types of work experience that you can look at. Okay, you've got shadowing, volunteering, care role. They're the ones that I'm going to talk about a little bit further on how you can get them and how you can actually make the most out of them. And I've also highlighted kind of lectures, conferences. You can go to research, cardiology conferences. They can take medical students, pre-medical students as well. Okay. And then also highlighted external companies. Just mentioned medical projects. We actually do work experience. I'm currently down in London, and we've got the school group of Qatari students who are interested in medicine, and we're doing simulations in an ER room and in an A&E room, and we're teaching how to manage patient arrest. It'll be quite interesting. So yeah, there's a load of different types. You might need to think outside the box like that. Okay, shadowing. We'll cover that a little bit because that's, as I said, the most common one that people think they need to have. Okay, you don't need to have shadowing, and you don't need to shadow a doctor. Okay, in the UK and the NHS, there's a lot of uh, stress on the word MDT. Okay, this is the multidisciplinary team. This is hugely important in a hospital, hugely important in a GP surgery, hugely important in a care home, a hospice, anywhere that's looking after vulnerable people. Okay, so yeah, it's usually observational, but what the best way that you can do to get out of this work experience is actually to ask questions. Ask questions. If you've got it with a doctor, then great, okay? But ask questions to the doctor, ask questions to, there might be a ward clock in the ward, there might be, one of the nursing practitioners that you might be able to have a chat to. What's their role? What do they do their day to day? How do they integrate with the doctor? What's their opinion on a current news issue? Ask loads and loads of questions. You're not a medical student yet at that point. They don't expect you to know everything. So ask everything and anything. Okay. So volunteering. Volunteering will kind of blur a little bit into when we talk about this care role. Okay. Volunteering, you can volunteer in anything. Okay. It doesn't have to be medical. So I'm talking about giving out books on a ward. We're talking about working in a charity shop, volunteering in maybe a animal shelter. Okay, it's more about what you can learn from the experience, what you can get out of it as a person, and what will make you a better doctor in the future. That's what they want to see. Okay, if you can volunteer for a longer period of time, say for example like once a week for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, that's fine. When I was doing my work experience, I worked in a hospice, and I actually worked every 2 weeks on a Sunday. So it was twice a month that I was working, okay? And I'd work for the whole year. So it's not actually a huge commitment. I know people were concerned about splitting their time with the UK CAT and the BMAT and their studies, and I'm sure they have other commitments in the evening. You want family time, friends time. You actually have to have a little bit of a life as well. If you're thinking about an extended period of time, it doesn't have to be, a full-time job. It can just be a couple of hours in the morning on a Sunday when you have a little bit of time. Put it into your schedule as well, okay? So, move this down. So yeah, so care role, it blurs a little bit into this volunteering section because obviously being in a care role, you can do it volunteering wise. As I mentioned, being in a hospice was my care role, okay? You can do care roles with, if you work with disabled children, for example. What they're looking for in a care role is looking for whether you're working with a vulnerable person, okay? So I think that's the key, because when you're working with a vulnerable person that all your ages, then it reflects very well for when you're a doctor. You think about the patients that you see as a doctor, they're all vulnerable patients, okay? People come in unwell, they come in sick, they come in old or young, people come in at their most vulnerable and you see them as a doctor, okay? You do really need to think about this care role. Some universities specifically look for a care role as well. I know when I was applying to Manchester, they specifically looked for a care role. So you can see on UCAS and university websites, I think there's a couple of reference websites on Google as well that you can see that actually collate information about universities and work experience. They're really good. To have a look at your university that you're thinking about applying to and make sure that you've got the type of work experience that they're looking for. They might be looking at a particular skill. So I've highlighted some skills here. So empathy, communication skills, patience. Some universities look specifically for a skill as well. So whether they've shown leadership, shown communication, shown empathy, they're really important as well, okay? I'd really I think you can learn so much from a care role. You can reflect so much on a care role. I think I stress importance on that as well as other work experience opportunities. Okay. So, what work experience should you actually have? Okay, there's no specific answer, and I can't tell you a specific answer. It's more about the quality of the work experience rather than the quantity. If that makes sense. So, if you have a couple of weeks, but you have learned so much about yourself as a person, about life as a doctor, about life as a nurse, about life in a hospital. You've been able to become such a good leader in, a couple of months, something like that. That's far better than, having a couple of weeks here and there. You haven't really learned anything and you've just been able to write it down and put it on your personal statement. Okay. They can tell the difference in universities. Okay. So I've mentioned maybe one experience, this is just a suggestion, maybe one experience for a more extended period of time. So just to show that commitment to medicine that they're looking for, okay? Again, if you just kind of have 1 week of work experience every summer for a few years, it's kind of, oh, it's fit into my schedule in when I'm off school. You just need to show a little bit more effort into actually that commitment towards medicine. Again, I've highlighted the word realistic here. In interviews, the university can tell whether you actually have a realistic view. If you start saying, oh, I've seen this doctor and we were in clinic and he was curing cancer every day, it's just that touch towards the unrealistic side, and they kind of would know that, don't quite fully understand. But again, I've said that, you need to look at specific university requirements, okay? Okay, right. So if you think about work experience, the first time you're going to actually write it down is on your personal statement. Okay, so we're just going to focus a little bit more on the personal statement. I'll show you an example and actually how to write it the best way in your personal statement. I'm sure you guys have come across some people in the past who've said, there's not enough words on a personal statement, 4,000 characters. Um, it's not enough once you start writing things down, okay? And you actually need to collate things together. Just to, I found it really difficult writing my personal statements anyway. Okay. Right. So how can you actually use it? So I've already said this. It's not the important thing isn't actually what you've done, but what you've learned from it. Okay. So when you're writing things down, it doesn't have to be on September the 20th for 46 hours, I worked in the oncology ward in St. George's Hospital. I just completely made that up, okay? Um, they don't want to, they're not interested in that. What they are interested in is if you said, for 1 week I volunteered on an oncology ward. I've seen patients that were most vulnerable. I've seen nurses and doctors communicate with these patients in a way that they could understand, that they were so empathetic, and I learned that and I've been able to put that into my job. That's what they want to see. Okay. So again, of course, you don't need to put things in super detail, but this is the reflections that they like to see. They want to see what you think about the NHS. They want to see what you think about being a healthcare professional is like day to day. So it could be, obviously we're focusing on being a doctor here. What's life like in a hospital? You might say that I was on ward rounds. So that kind of gives them a little bit of a hint that you know that there's ward rounds every day in a hospital, that there's clinics every day in a hospital. Okay, so they like to see that you have a good insight, and again, they like to know that you know and are aware of your own skill set and how that makes you a better doctor. Okay, that's really really quite key for your personal statement. Okay, this is just an example. You can have a read through yourselves. This is just something kind of collated together. What I've just tried to highlight is that All it says is during my gap year. Okay, that's it. There's no specific time and date. Then you can say several months. So it just shows that extended commitment to medicine, and that's it. So then you can put in your buzzwords. So we've got encouraging, empathizing. Then we can put about vulnerable moments. Okay, and then what you can say is what you've learned and how that then reflects to being a doctor. A doctor is present at people's most vulnerable moments, and this is why one of the reasons why I want to pursue medicine as a vocation. Okay, so can you see how it's a brief description of the situation, and then you basically say what you've learned and how that relates to medicine. That's ultimately the best way of doing it. Okay, all of you will have different experiences. All of you will be able to kind of put that together in your own unique way. Okay, so we'll move on quickly. So we've got how to use this in an interview. It's exactly the same when you're in an interview. No matter what test questions you get, try and incorporate work experience into your answer. If you've got enough work experience and you've got enough time, then mention something. If you've done some work experience in relation to, you might have seen an issue with abortion in a GP surgery, okay? Bring that in if you have an ethical scenario, or if you are asked about your leadership skills, then bring in that you did something with and displayed certain leadership skills, and then reflect that, and that would mean making a better medical student, and that would mean making a better doctor. Okay, all of these standard questions for interview you can relate work experience to. It doesn't immediately look like it, but you can. Okay, if you say, oh, I've seen a doctor on a ward and we were talking about this current media issue, you can bring that in. Okay, right, we'll look at a quick example. So tell me about a time that you displayed good leadership skills. Okay, again, brief description. Okay, you don't have to say, when I was a leader for how many months and for this school, whatever. You can just say, for my school team, I was a leader. Key buzzwords: organization, timekeeping, attention to detail, and then relate it back to how that reflects back to medicine. Helps me understand we need to be prepared for the unexpected. Okay, it's totally true for being a doctor. Okay, I didn't. Let's be honest. If you were an interview, you would answer a lot more description in that answer, but slides are only so good. Okay, these are my top tips for work experience. The top one I wish I did when I was doing all my work experience. I did quite a lot of work experience, and I actually still didn't get in first time. I think it was because I was only having like 1 week, as I mentioned before, 1 week every summer while I was on my school break, and that was kind of it. And I was only shadowing, so I didn't quite have that caring role that we talked about before. And then I actually didn't quite remember what I'd done. So when you do it, work experience about 2 years ago, you're not actually going to fully remember what you've done. Keeping a diary is so valuable. You can write down what you learned, write down what reflections that you had at the time, and then you can actually simply just transfer it over to your personal statement. Then you're super prepared for doing your interview as well. Okay, it does work really well. I've got some of my students at the minute who are doing that with the diary. We give them booklets and everything, and it's very useful. Okay, reflect. I am not going to say this enough. Reflect, reflect, reflect. Okay, that is the key part of a work experience. You cannot reflect enough. Reflect about yourself. Reflect about being a doctor. Okay, reflect about being in the NHS, your life, what you want your life to be like, who you are, everything. Okay, again, think outside the box. You said shadowing a doctor is quite hard to come by sometimes. Think outside the box. It's about what you learn, not what you do. Okay, again, not just shadowing. If you can't get in with a doctor, but you can do shadowing, get in with another healthcare professional. We've already mentioned that everyone is just as important in the multidisciplinary team. Do as much work experience as you can with all healthcare professionals, and ask loads and loads of questions. Okay, so now is your time to ask loads of questions. Okay, I ran over. I'm I'm really sorry. Um, there is a Q&A box. I don't know whether we can use the actual Q&A box if you can type in. If you can't type in that, absolutely no worries. Put it in the chat box. We'll try and get in. Yes, cute little baby. Okay. Try and get into about that. I don't have a huge amount of time. I'll try and do about 5 minutes of questions. I do apologise. Okay. Right, crack on with some questions. I'll see what I can help with. Okay, so let's have a look. So, how is it possible to gain shadowing in the hospital? As I've said before, it's sometimes quite difficult, and it depends on what hospital you approach. I only got work experience shadowing in a hospital through family friends, and I was just very lucky. A lot of my friends who were applying to medicine couldn't get in. If you don't get into shadowing in a hospital, think of other roles. Think of that care role. I'm sure a care home nearby where you live would be so glad to have you help. They're always understaffed, and they'll be glad to have a little bit of an extra helping hand. Okay. So yeah. So does St. John's Ambulance count? So if you're working with them and volunteering with them, then yeah, of course it does. If you just do the simple first aid course, a lot of people do the simple first aid course at St. John's Ambulance. So just bear that in mind. If you had a great experience on that day, then yeah, that's perfect. Reflect on that, and if you've learned something specific, do put that in, okay? But if it if it's something a little bit standard and you didn't learn too much, don't put it. Okay. So someone's asking specifically about dentistry. I will be honest, I'm not 100% sure about dentistry degrees. I'm sure it'll be very similar though. So if you said that you've got work experience coming up at a dentist and an orthodontist, I'm sure that's fine. If you are learning a lot from that experience, then I'm sure dentistry degrees and universities will be looking for the same. If you're learning about the life of an orthodontist, then that's great. You're learning about the day-to-day life. It gives you that realistic experience. Is it better to do more volunteering than work experience? Again, they kind of overlap work experience and volunteering. It depends where you volunteer. It depends on the university you apply to. Some universities look for more volunteering and care roles than kind of this work experience and shadowing side of things. So make sure that you're looking at the university that you want to apply to. But again, look, if you're learning more about being in a volunteering role, that's fine. That's where you need to go. Okay. So, do you suggest experience in the NHS with the London project and more volunteering at the Kilimanjaro project? Yeah, so that I presume, Kalasi, that's our specific medical project one. So with the NHS, it's probably a little bit more appropriate with Project London, because with Project London, you've actually got an NHS doctor, medical student that comes with you on the project and teaches you. You have a whole day of basically this session. We go through from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Doing a variety of personal statements, interview skills. We do it about UK Cat and BMAT as well. Obviously, don't do it as intense as this because it would be great. And then we do kind of scenarios specifically that might happen in the NHS. So it might be replicating scenarios regards to mental health, which is the big deal in the A&Es and the NHS. Project Kilimanjaro is just something totally different. You'll be able to see their side of healthcare. So if you wanted to see an extra insight and be able to compare it to the NHS, that'd be a good chat. Is it possible to volunteer in the hospital, or is there an age restriction? That's a really good question, actually. It depends what you're doing as a volunteer. Some of them have a minimum age of 16, but some have a minimum age of 18. So do check when applying or kind of gaining an insight onto the actual volunteering job. Um, I think when you've got more hands-on contact with a patient, it's more over 18s. But if it's kind of maybe reading patients on a dementia ward, I've had a student do that and they're 17. So yeah, so it depends. Lots of questions, lots of questions. I'll take two more, and that's it because I'll be running over then into Bactar, okay? Um, so, sorry, loads and loads are coming in at once. So the idea of spending 5 to 6 years in university is quite daunting to me, okay? Followed by even more education years on. How was your time doing medical school and it's something to be worried about? That's a really, really good question, and I actually will end on that question because it's quite a long answer. So I really enjoyed my experience in medical school. I don't know about Bactar, but my experience was nowhere near as hard as I thought it would be. My first year was hard. I found my first year quite hard because it's a little bit of a transition, moving away from home, moving into kind of self-study mode. I went to a PBL university, which I highly enjoyed, um, but it was just a little bit different of a transition. Second and third year, I found far easier, and then it just built up towards finals, and obviously to build all your and combine all your information for 5 years. I've actually even enjoyed far more working as a doctor. Okay, I would not change it for the world. I don't think there's any other job that you can do what we do, see what we do, work with with these amazing people. Honestly, wouldn't change it for the world. I love working in A&E. You see everything that is so variable in conditions. I think it's amazing. You do get things that will be daunting, but that's when it's so good nowadays being a doctor in the sense that you do have support, and there is always support if you need it. So don't worry, there is always help or help in hand if you do need it. Okay, so hopefully I reassured you a little bit about that. Okay. Okay, right. So I'm going to end here. I hope I wasn't too awful mixing up my words and, with all this technology, okay? And I'll hand you back over to Bactar. It's been amazing, guys, and hope to see you guys soon, okay?
Right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that talk by April. Again, always amazing to have April come over to one of these talks and just give you guys an excellent insight into what work experience life is like, and also what life is like as a doctor, which is not far away from me either. I just got another few weeks to go. I think I've been in med school. So yeah, I would like to touch on what April's last question as well, in terms of, it is a long course, 6 years for me, and I have now got 5 weeks left of med school, and then it just finishes. If anything, again, in terms of workload as well, the workload can be tough, but only if you leave it all to the end. If you keep going through it slowly as you go through the whole year, it really isn't that bad. And if you manage your time well, like, Amna is here, she's doing like answering your questions, so is Piri, so is Surya, and I am as well. We have one of the biggest med school exams tomorrow. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. we've got an exam. But here we are doing this talk and everything because, you know what, if you organize your time properly, you really can make time for other things that you love and enjoy. So what I'll do is, just for the next 5 minutes or so, because I know there was loads and loads and loads of questions, I'll do some questions as well for you guys. So before we start the BMAT talk in the next 5 to 10 minutes, let's get some more questions going, because I feel like, a lot of the time, a lot of students don't really have a chance to talk to someone about their experiences or any questions that they may have before they start going to med school or dental school. So one of the questions I saw earlier, which does apply to me, and I'm not too sure about April, but I did take a gap year because I didn't get in first time around, and 60% of the people don't get into medicine or dentistry in the first application. So you do have to, have that option as to what would you do if you don't get in. So I took a gap year, and during my gap year, my main priority was to secure good work experience, improve my application so that when I apply second time round, I would have a good chance of getting in. So I managed to get myself actually a job. I applied through NHS Jobs. and I worked as a phlebotomist for almost 9 months full time, whilst doing things I enjoyed. So I did a bit of traveling as well, and just things like that, just to improve my skills, my communication skills. And you know what? I wouldn't have changed it for the world. The person I am today is mainly because of that gap here. So you wouldn't realize how much you can learn from a time like that, and your work experiences and all these things that can really help you develop into a good doctor one day. I'm just going to have a look at some more questions. So they do keep changing to. So yeah, so again, results is not the only thing. So I did get, my results were great. My UKCAT I did really well. I did really well my BMAT, my A levels and GCSEs. And so was my personal statement. But when it came to interviews, I used to be very shy. Some people say I won't believe that now because I do these talks and all the presentations and everything. But I used to be a very shy person, and it was making myself go out of my comfort zone that really helped me to become really good at communication skills, which then led me to this job where I help motivate and teach so many people, and obviously running the Kaplan interview courses as well and things like that. So at the time for me, and I know a lot of students in the initial poll, you guys said that you were in year 12. So if you're in year 12, I'm guessing that you're applying for the second time. So yeah, honestly, don't be disheartened by getting those rejections. Happened to me, I've been there. But it was one of the best things that happened to me, because you will just learn so much from whatever you end up doing, whether you take a gap year or whether you end up doing another degree before you start medicine or dentistry. So how did I prepare for UKCAT BMAT test? Practice, honestly. For both those, the UCAT and the BMAT, minimum of 4 weeks. I would recommend about 4 to 6 weeks of good preparation. Obviously, the information I gave you guys earlier about the different courses that we do, and then just practice with the right techniques. Try and make it as similar to the real thing as possible, which is why you have to do a lot of your practice behind a computer screen, looking at those questions and trying to solve them using the on-screen calculator and things like that. How do you prepare for interviews? Well, if you guys have interviews, which I'm sure some of you do, just try and get as many people to interview you. Don't over prepare. My biggest advice to you guys would be yourself. I see, I've taught hundreds of students by now in the last few years, UCAT, BMAT, interviews, whatever, and every student is individual in their own way. There's no right or wrong answer. So if someone says, why do you want to do medicine? We want to know, having sat on interview panels and things like that, we want to know, what is it about you that makes you want to do medicine? Don't just give a generic answer, reflect on it. Reflect on your answer, your work experiences. What was it that you saw that really excited you and really wanted to make you do medicine? So talk about things like those. Let's have a look at some more questions. Do you see the UCAT before application or after? Yeah, you have to see the UCAT before. So the application deadline is the 15th of October 2019, and that's the UCAS deadline, and then the last date to sit the UCAT is the 2nd of October. How do you make your personal statement very competitive? So think of your personal statement, split it into like an introduction, why you want to do medicine and dentistry. Then talk about some of your work experiences. And again, don't just list stuff. The number of times I read personal statements and I talk to students and they say, oh, I did 2 weeks here, I did 2 weeks there, I did a week in neurosurgery. That doesn't mean anything. If you don't reflect on it, it does not mean anything. So just to give you guys an example, again, April gave you guys a few examples as well. If I were to use one of my experiences, so I'm just going to use a hospital placement I did last year. So make it very short. So during my orthopedics placement at so-and-so hospital, I was observing surgery. So whilst observing this hip replacement, I saw that the surgeon accidentally hit the femoral artery. Blood started spurting out. Okay, so talk about that. You just set the scene. What you want to do then is really tell them about what you saw that really was amazing. So in this situation, I saw that the two surgeons, they very quickly managed to cauterize the artery and stop the bleeding. In a high stressful situation where there was an arterial bleed, both the surgeons remained calm and they were able to solve the problem under a very high stressful situation. Okay, and now step 3 is about you. Tell them about a point where, in your life or some point, whether you were doing a football match or something like that, whatever it is, where there was a high stress situation, but you managed to combat it using your calmness or your communication skills or your team working skills. And that really helps you sell yourself. Okay. What else is there? So when did you decide to pursue medicine? So again, for everyone, it's different. I've always wanted to be a doctor. It's something that I've always wanted to do, which is why I'm so passionate about it. And I try to help as many people as I can. But for some people, it is, it is quite a late decision, and there's no right or wrong way. A lot of students want to do medicine because they have an interest in science, and then they want to work with people. For me personally, it is the best job in the world. It is something that you get to interact with people, you get to use that knowledge to help people, and there's no better feeling when you're able to successfully help someone. I recently did a placement in America. I fortunately somehow managed to get a scholarship to go to America and do 5 weeks there. And one of the best stories I had from that experience was when, as a medical student, I would go and see this family every single day and assess them and carry out examinations and all those things and make sure they're okay. On the last day, just before I left, they were really upset that I was leaving. They were saying, "You're one of the nicest people who come in and check on us every day." And the mother of the patient gave me a hug, right? And she was in tears saying how amazing the whole experience has been. And it's moments like those which just make all those years and years of hard work worth it. So definitely there is a lot of reward, a sensation of reward behind that hard work, and it's incredible. Final question. I'm trying to pick one which is the most useful for out of all of you. How do you answer the question, why do you want to do medicine? Okay, so again, there is different ways to do that. Everyone has their own reasons, but try and not over-prepare for this question. It is something that you're very likely to get asked. Whether you're doing MMIs or you're doing a panel interview, you're very likely to get asked this question. So think, sit down in your room or wherever you are and just think of different ways to answer that question, or different reasons. Why do you actually want to do medicine? There's no right or wrong way. Everyone has different reasons. So for me personally, it was something that I've always grown up with that. My dad was a doctor, so I just wanted to follow in that footstep. But that's not good enough on its own. You have to have other reasons. So whatever it is for you, if you enjoy science, or definitely talk about your work experience, relate that in as well. So talk about your work experience. And one of my students recently I was talking to, and she said that for her, it was when she was doing the work experience, talking to the patients and listening to all the different problems that they're going through, you really feel the need that, you just wish that you could help them. And doing medicine gives you that exact opportunity for you to be able to help people. And trust me, there's no better feeling than putting a smile on someone's face when they're really low, or just making someone feel better when they're unwell. And that's something that you can talk about. Right, guys, thank you so much for staying here for the Q&A session. So I'm now going to go and do the talk about I'm just seeing the Instagram tag, it's so funny. I'm just going to go do a talk about BMAT now. So if you guys are thinking of doing the BMAT, by all means stay. If you're not doing the BMAT at all, you can feel free to leave the session now, but it is going to be quite useful just to give you guys a bit of a introduction to BMAT, just like we did with the UKCAT. It's going to be a little bit shorter, so it won't be as long and as strenuous as the UKCAT talk. But thank you very much for those of you who were here until now, and I think April is still answering some of your questions, so keep typing them in the box if you like. Right, we'll get started with the BMAT. So the BMAT is the other admissions exam that some universities take depending on, again, where you apply. So let's just go through that. So it's a biomedical admissions test required by 8 universities, and there's 2 dates only. So it's a paper exam that you will sit either at your school or at an external institute. You do have to sign up for it. It is £46, and you would go to that website link there to sign up for that. Right, so let's go on to the next page. And these are some of the important dates. So the first BMAT test day is 1st of September. And then the second BMAT test day is 31st of October. Now, depending on what universities you're applying to, they will either not care which date you sit the exam, or they will have a preference. As in, I think Oxford want you to sit the exam on the 31st of October. That was last year. They might have changed it, but definitely worth looking before you sign up to do the BMAT. And again, if you guys can't see the slides or anything like that, just make sure you just refresh your page and you'll be allowed to see that again. Right, so those are the universities that want you guys to apply for the BMAT exam when you're applying for medicine. Right, let's go on to the next page. So the BMAT is made up of 3 sections. Okay, so you have the aptitude and skills section, which is 35 questions, 60 minutes. Then you've got the scientific knowledge and applications, 27 questions in half an hour, and then the writing task. Now, as we go through each section, I'll break that down a little bit more, give you guys exact amount of how long you should be spending on each question, and what kind of techniques will be useful. So the way it's scored, okay, so the BMAT score, the section 1 is an average score. Let's just have a look, bring that up. So the top 10% score of 6.3 or above, the average score last year was around here, if you can see, that's like a 4. But anything above 5.5 is very competitive. So that's going to put you on the higher end of the scale, like the the top 3 deciles. And again, that's perfect. We'll look at the average scores in a second. The top 10% in the second section score about 6.5 or above. So again, here that's the first decile, and anything above 5.5 again is perfect. Right, let's go on to the third section. The third section is the essay writing task. So this one's scored slightly differently. So you get score 1 to 5, so 0 to 5, based on the quality of your content, and then A to E, which is how good your English is. And again, we'll talk about that later on in a bit more detail. So let's go into some sample questions. So first of all, the first section, aptitude and skills. So a lot of the questions in this section will be like verbal, almost like verbal reasoning in a way, but a little bit more complicated. So, and also you'll get some problem-solving questions too. Like I said earlier, you will have 35 questions and you'll have 60 minutes to do them. So aim to spend about 2 minutes, just under 2 minutes on each question. So let's give you guys an example of a question. I'm going to give you guys a minute and a half for this one. Okay, so go for it. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a few seconds just to mark an answer on the poll on the top left of your screen whilst I give you guys a bit of information about the question. So, which of the following is a central assumption implicit in the above argument? So, this is the kind of question which looks at the assumption. So, let's just talk a bit about what the assumption is. Okay, so we can do that through like a simple equation in a way. So, first of all, let me bring up the equation. There it is. Okay, so let's talk about these 3 terms. So the conclusion of the passage is the author's main point. It's the most important point that the author is trying to get across through that passage. The evidence are the reasons given to back up that point. Okay, and the assumption is the link between those two. So it's always unstated. It's never mentioned in the passage, and it basically links the evidence to the assumption. So if you look at this equation here, it's the evidence plus the assumption leads you to the conclusion. The evidence and the conclusion will be in the passage, whereas the assumption is something that you have to think of yourself. Now, the best way to do this question would be not to look at the answers, okay? First, because that can, again, skew your answer. So what you want to do is try and find the conclusion first. So this sentence here, one can conclude from this that most scientists hold themselves to higher standards than those prescribed by the law. That's your conclusion right there, okay? So that's something to think about. The evidence is the information given to you elsewhere, so to back that up. So stealthy DNA tests are illegal in the UK, and they have life-altering consequences in the US. Now, your assumption here, okay, is something that's going to be mentioned in the evidence, but not in the, mentioned in the conclusion, but not mentioned in the evidence. So in this case, it's fair to say that scientists and their standards, or how they think and how they do things, and the consequences they'll be facing, is the assumption, because that's the link between the two. So something like, if we have a look at this statement, it has to talk about scientists and it has to talk about like their work. So it won't be A, man who conducted a DNA test, blah, blah, blah. That's information given to us in the passage, right? In B, some US companies conduct stealthy DNA tests with the threat of legal penalty. Again, that information is in the passage. So A and B, I would eliminate so far. C, work done by scientists may have unforeseen consequences, right? That's decent. D, scientists bear responsibilities for the consequences of their work, right? That's a much better answer. So in this case, I would eliminate C because D is definitely better than C. And then finally, E, there are no companies that conduct stealthy DNA tests in the UK. We don't know that information, so I would eliminate that. Leaves me with D, which is the correct answer. So that is what you want to do with the assumption question. It's very important to find the conclusion first, find the evidence, and then go from there. Right, let's go on to the next question. Which of the following illustrates a flaw in the argument? Now, with these questions, again, you want to try and find the assumption, because that assumption would then be flawed. So find the conclusion, find the evidence, think of the assumption, and go from there. I'm going to give you guys about a minute for this one. Okay, so that's a minute over. Let's have a look at some of the conclusions. So, but its example proves that. Sorry, I shouldn't have marked this. I'm going to try and undo that. Yeah, so its example proves that. These are some of the key words that will lead you to the conclusion. Okay, any species of flower regenerated by scientists with the proper experience and knowledge of ancient flowers. So that's your conclusion right there. Okay, that we can regenerate any species of flower. The evidence comes from the fact that the scientists, were able to regenerate one species of flower after 30,000 years. So the assumption would be something to do with that one example means that we can regenerate all the different species of flower. So that's your flaw right there. So that's what you want to look for in the answer. Look for something that's the most similar to the one species of flower isn't accountable for all the different species that there are millions and millions of them. So we'll try and find that. And if you look at answer E, it says it makes a generalization about flowers based on the experience of a single species of flower. It's just exactly that. So with these kind of questions, don't try and not look at the answers first, because those will only make you biased towards one answer rather than the correct one maybe. So it's a very good idea to think of the conclusion, think of the evidence, think of the assumption, and then go from there. Right, so that is the first section. We'll now go on to the scientific knowledge and application section. So this one's more to do with the biology, chemistry, physics, and maths topics. Majority of this, it comes from GCSE knowledge, so you don't really need to do if you haven't done A levels in one of those topics, it doesn't matter. Of course it helps, but you don't have to have those. Most of you would have done, pretty much all of you would have done 3 science and maths GCSEs. So let's have a look at this section now. It's 27 questions and 30 minutes for this section. So spend about a minute per question and you should be okay. Right, so let's have a look at this question first. I'm going to give you guys about a minute to try and solve this, and we'll go from there. Okay, so looking at the table, I'm going to give you guys the answers in a minute. Because a lot of the time, you have to do some work before you get to the answers. A lot of students make the mistake of rushing to the answers straight away, which is something you don't want to do. So Sophie herself is not affected. Her husband is not affected. But Sophie's father was red-green colorblind. Her mother wasn't, and her sister is. So from that, you can think that it's X-linked because both men and women are affected. And then men have one X chromosome, so they can't be carriers. They can either have the disease, in this case, red-green colorblind, or they won't. Okay. Whereas Sophie's husband is XY because he doesn't, but her dad must be XC, the little c saying that he has the allele for colorblindness, and then Y obviously being the Y chromosome. So Sophie therefore must be a carrier, okay, because that XC allele came from her dad, because men only have one X chromosome. So she has the allele for that. So what you want to do is make a Punnett square, okay, for Sophie in this case on the left and Sophie's husband at the top. And then you can look at the questions and think which one would be correct. So let's go through each one. Half of the females will be carriers. So we've got the two females here, and one of them is a carrier. So one is correct. Okay. The second one, half of the females will be red-green colorblind. Well, neither of the females will be red-green colorblind. One's perfectly normal. The other one has the allele, so she's a carrier. So 2 is not correct. 3, it says half of the males will be carriers. We already discussed that males cannot be carriers of an X-linked condition. So that's also incorrect. And then 4, half of the males will be red-green colorblind. And in this case, yeah, one of the 2 of them is red-green colorblind. That's actually a tongue twister. It's very difficult to say. So 1 and 4 are correct. Therefore, the correct answer must be F. So that's the kind of work you would have to do. And again, you can see that 1 minute sometimes is not enough. So you do have to work very quick with BMAT as well. Let's have another chemistry kind of question. So I'll give you guys about a minute for this question. Right, so that's a minute over. Now, with these questions, often you don't have to work out exactly what's going on. So I'm going to teach you guys a little technique that you can apply to BMAT and the UCAT as well, is how to make yourself work even faster, right? So the first thing is you've been given some information. You've got the different weights of the atoms. So titanium is 48 and then oxygen is 16. And you can see that 16 times 3. So for every 3 oxygen atoms, a titanium atom would be the same, okay? So think of something, think of the answers that you have, the 4 answers. Whilst I explain this to you, let me give you the poll anyway, so you guys can just mark your answers down there. So A, B, C, or D. So try and think of answers that are too small, right? So if you got titanium is about 50, oxygen is about 15, D and C are too small. They're clearly not going to get you the answer of 144 grams per mole. So I would eliminate those, okay? Then think of an answer that's too big. So if there's 3 titanium atoms, that's almost 150 right there, which is way more than the answer that we're trying to get to. So even A is going to be incorrect. So without doing any maths, any proper maths at all, you can get to the correct answer. So that's some ways that you can help make your maths a little bit quicker and try and get to the answer a bit quicker. And the majority of you selected B were the correct answer, so well done. We're going to do another question, so this time physics. So we're going to look at atoms, and we can look at isotopes and atomic numbers and things like that. So I'm going to give you guys a minute to solve this one. Okay, so with this question, some of you are asking some questions. So you're not allowed a calculator in the BMAT. No calculators allowed at all. And so yeah, let's go through this one. So first of all, there's two types of particles, alpha and beta particles. So the atomic number, just to give you guys a reminder, is the number of protons, and the mass number is the protons and the neutrons. So an alpha particle is two protons and two neutrons, and it just basically leaves the atom. So basically you would subtract 4 from the mass number and 2 from the atomic number. So 8 alpha particles means that you take away 32 from the mass number, so the answer would be 206. So either C or G. Everything else just eliminate it. So you've already narrowed down your answer to two options. The next thing, you want to subtract 2 for each alpha particle, which means you would take away 16 from the atomic number. That brings you down to about 76, which is C. But that's not it. A lot of students attempted to select C and move on, but you remember there's still 6 beta particles you have to take away. So a beta particle is one neutron that converts into a proton and therefore releasing an electron to make it electronically balanced. So you would add 1 to the atomic number for each beta particle. In this case, there were 6, so add 6 to 76 and you end up with 82, G being the correct answer. So again, a little bit of maths that you need to do, nothing too complicated. Right, let's go on to just looking at some of the topics that come up again and again. So within BMAT physics topics, you'll be seeing things like velocity and acceleration, force, work and power, kinetic energy and potential energy, circuits, waves, and radioactive decay. So make sure you memorize those or revise those from GCSE. So someone said earlier that you're not doing A-level physics. So this is not A-levels. None of the BMAT is A-level stuff, nor is the UCAT. It's all GCSE knowledge. So you may have to go back and revise your GCSE knowledge of physics, science, or biology and chemistry. Hopefully you still got the books and you haven't thrown them away. Let's go on to maths now. So maths is also in this section. And a question like this might come up on the BMAT. Again, no calculators, and I'll give you guys a minute to do this. Okay, so that is a minute over. Let me give you guys the poll to answer what you think is correct. So we'll also give you some of the tips. So first of all, the first thing to look at is whether the answer is going to be negative or positive. You've got 2 negative options and 2 positive options. So the first thing you want to do is have a look on the left of the equal sign. The power is 3. On the right, the power is 6, which means if you had a negative answer, the left would be a negative, whereas the right would be a positive. So that can't work. So you eliminate A and B straight away, because that means you're going to have imbalances in terms of power. That leaves us with 2 other things. So you've got 5 over 2 or 9 over 5. And again, it seems complicated, but there's a little trick. With BMAT, it's all about using little tricks like this. So have a look at where it says 100x. If 100x was C, if x was C, that would become something like 500, okay? So it would become 500. Whereas if x was C, in this case, it would be like 25 over 5. In which case, if you do 25 over 2, if you then do that to the power of 6, you're not going to get an integer anymore. You're going to get something with a decimal place, like, I don't know, it'll go on forever. So C can't be correct either. It must be therefore D, because if you did 9 over 5 and then put that in there, that would be an integer, and this would be an integer. So that's how you can work out without a calculator. You have to be a bit clever about these things. It's not your standard maths questions. They're slightly tricky. So yeah, that's the answer for that question. Now we're going to go on to the third task, which is the writing task. In the BMAT, section 3, you'll get half an hour to basically write an essay. And you'll have a 1 essay choice. You'll have a choice of 3 titles, and you pick one, the one that you feel the best that you will do the best in, and then go with that. And again, titles differ, and I'm not going to get you guys to write an essay, so this is going to be a very short little introduction in the section 3. So it basically asks you to do 3 things. Okay, explain the quote, consider an opposite alternative to the viewpoint, and then reconcile the two. So basically think of it as an introduction, then write a paragraph for the quote, write a paragraph against the quote, like, okay, so you have a balanced argument, and then do a bit of a summary about the two. And students who really structure their essay, really plan it first, I would definitely recommend that you guys spend the first 10 to about 12 minutes really trying to plan your essay, do a brainstorm, think of all the good ideas that you come up with regarding the quote or the title, and then pick a few of them and then include those into your essay. When you start writing, you only have a very short amount of space to write the essay. When I teach this stuff in class, majority of the students do the essay writing bit in 10 minutes out of the half an hour. So then you just get, then you've already used up your space, you can't cross out and write more. So make sure you plan really well. Students who plan well with their essay always score higher than those who just rush in straight away. So make sure that's something that you do. There's no limit on how many words. Okay, you will get it's like an A4 piece of paper. It's lined. You get an A4 piece of paper which is lined. There's a border as well. You have to stay within the border. So it's actually not a huge amount of space at all. And again, if you have huge handwriting, start practicing on reducing the size of your handwriting, and therefore you can fit more in. Okay, so let's go on looking at some of the preparation resources. So similar to the UCAT, there's obviously courses for this too. So BMAT Classroom's courses that are in London and across the UK. There's also live online courses, and there's a 5-day course as well now that we've started doing with an external company. So we always focus on score raising techniques, so really going into, like for example, some of the tips I just taught you guys about how to be a bit clever with some of the questions that may come up. Things like that. We focus on topics that come up again and again and how to problem solve in some of the questions. And it's a very interactive classroom, whether it's online or in person. And you can also prep on your own, or you can go for private tutoring options too. So within the course material, when you buy the course, you'll be given video lessons, you'll have a strategy book, and you'll have an online study center. And you have 6 full-length practice tests, and there's an essay marking service. So you write your essay, you send it in to one of us, and we'll have a look and we'll mark your essay and go from there. And again, like I said earlier, there's interview and MMI preparation too. So for you guys, if you have interviews coming up after you've done your examinations, that's something that we provide. And these run from from October till January. I'm going to do a little poll just now, asking about those of you who want another Q&A. I know there's been lots of them, but since we finished a little bit early, so would you guys like another short Q&A session or not? Well, if you're saying no, you can always leave. But a majority of you are saying yes, so why not do a short Q&A session again? So first of all, thank you very much for staying so far with the BMAT talk as well. It's almost been 3 hours since we started. So yeah, let's have a few questions then. So, okay, so if you're rejected again, there's multiple options. So the way I see it, okay, when you apply for medicine, again, some people do get, unfortunately, there is it's in a way, it's a bit of a game of the luck, really, whether you get in or not. So if you're applying for the first time and you get rejected, I would really encourage you guys to really make sure that you smash those A levels. Okay, if you get your 3 A's, you're in a very good position, because that means you can just keep applying. Okay, and one of those times, it depends how passionate you are as well. Another option is if you didn't get your 3 A's, maybe you had an offer and you didn't get your 3 A's or something like that, which does happened to my brother as well. Then you can either do another degree and then from there do well in that degree and then go into medicine as a postgrad, or as an undergrad degree even after doing your like another degree. It can be anything, it doesn't have to be medicine related. Or the third option is you can go abroad. So you can study in Europe. There's places in Europe that will that take students. Again, there's a lot of information about that on the internet. So those are the 3 big options you've got. So when do you take the UCAT and the BMAT? Well, that information was, it's going to be on the Kaplan website as well, and it was at the beginning of this talk, which will be emailed to you guys. What do you specialize in? So at the moment, I am a medical student, but I am hugely interested in emergency and pre-hospital medicine. So I did an integrated degree with the London's Air Ambulance, and that was just the best year of uni so far. and it was just amazing. And because of that, I then managed to get elective in America and in South Africa as well. So it's just been amazing. So for me, emergency medicine would be the field that I would want to go into. What is the minimum number of work experience days? There is no minimum. So in terms of work experience days, there honestly is no minimum. Do as much as you can. The main thing is not quantity, it's about quality. Okay, you can. I know students who've done like 3 or 4 days, but they learn more from those 3 or 4 days than other students spending weeks and weeks. It's all about how much you can reflect on it. So what is the A-level equivalent in Scotland? It's the Scottish Highers. I think I don't know too much about it, but that's all I know because I've done a few classes in Scotland. So yeah. How many interviews did I get? So depending on the different unis, so BOTS have a panel interview. There can be 3 interviewers there, so 2 doctors and a medical student. Other universities, if they do MMI, there can be up to 10 stations with 1 or 2 people, or 3 people in each station. So there can be a lot. Which is harder in your opinion? Okay, again, main thing, my opinion. In my opinion, I think the BMAT is a little bit harder, but that's just because the questions are slightly harder. But a lot more people find UKCAT tricky because it's so unusual. But again, this is my opinion because I do teach both courses. My opinion, I will say that a million times because I don't want to put anyone off. The UKCAT, you can, if you practice, there are techniques to get you through it, as there are for the BMAT too. But BMAT is really like, for example, there's a section fully focused on biology, chemistry, and physics and maths. Some students find that a little bit trickier. Okay, what if I'm doing 4 A-levels now? Should I drop psychology if I want to pursue veterinary medicine? There's no harm in dropping a subject if you're doing AS, because remember, all your exams are going to be at the end, and it can get very, very hectic. So if I could go back, I carried all 4 to A2. If I could go back, yes, I would have dropped 1, because I remember it got really intense. A lot of my friends had a lot of free periods, whereas I didn't. So I think, again, up to you. It's your personal choice. Talk to your teachers and stuff. But that's what I would have done if I could go back. But again, having 4 subjects means that you have a more competitive score if you do well in all of them. But it is that risk because you have to revise more. Are you going to do better? How do you take these exams via school? Okay, so the BMAT. You can go on the BMAT website and then you can look at application process. If you are an A-level student, your school will have a BMAT sitting. Your school should have a BMAT sitting. If they don't, there are external centers that will take you. UCAT is always in Pearson VUE centers. So again, go on the website and they will give you that information. Which unis did you apply to and why? I applied to BOTS, which is because it's the best uni in the world, where I go to now. Of course, I would say that. I applied to Newcastle. Again, it was really good. I basically applied to universities based on my strengths. So at that time, maybe things have changed now. They focused a lot more on UKCAT. I had a really good UKCAT score, and they focused a lot on GCSE and A-levels. So academically, I was quite strong on paper, and that's why I applied to BOTS, Newcastle. I applied to Imperial, which is why I had to do the BMAT, and I applied to Hull York as well. I ended up getting 2 offers, BOTS and Newcastle. What else? How easy is it to transfer countries as a doctor? I can't say too much about that as I don't really know. It's not my area of expertise, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Yeah, if practiced enough, can someone get a good grade in BMAT and UCAT? Of course you can. It's all about practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get. But also at the same time, be very careful because these exams can burn you out. Because, especially with the UCAT, there's no set knowledge that you're learning. You're just practicing questions over and over again. So they can really burn you out. So what I would do, rather than doing intense sessions, try and spread it out over a longer period of time. That way, it will be better for you in terms of understanding the questions and the type of questions that are going to come up, and also developing your techniques and working with them. The idea is to make it second nature by the time you sit your exam. How important are your GCSEs? They are important depending on what universities you're applying to. Again, every university is different. Best thing to do would be to go on their website and ask them specifically the questions that you have about their individual application process. Let's look. Did Newcastle increase your grades required? No, I still had a 3A offer, so they didn't. But again, universities, some of them have started asking for A stars now with A levels. What is the prep plan for BMAT? I would recommend 4 to 6 weeks when it comes to BMAT. Same with the UCAT. Again, everyone's different. Some people would like to do more than a few hours a day. Some people want to do just an hour a day. Everyone is different. So I would not say there's a specific time, but obviously the more prep you do, the better. But at the same time, make sure you don't run out of questions. If your exam is too far in the future and you run out of questions, then you're not really revising or you're not really practicing as much. So the optimum prep would have been done in about 4 weeks' time. What is the teaching style at Barts? So Barts has a good, well, in my opinion, it's a really great course structure. It's a spiral system. So every year you learn the same thing again and again, but building more detail onto that. So, and then we have PBLs as well. So the benefit of PBLs, in my opinion, is that, first of all, it's a great way to make new friends. But second of all, you will have lectures throughout the week. You will have other sessions. You'll have anatomy. You'll have physiology and things like that. But what PBLs do is it helps you group all of that together into one little 2-hour session a week, or maybe 2-hour sessions a week, and you discuss with everyone. And the best thing about PBL is it helps teach you things that you can't learn from a lecture. Things like communication skills, leadership skills, teamwork. These things that you pick up while sitting in a room talking to other people, it kind of simulates the environment that you will be in as a doctor one day when you're working within the MDT. Final few questions. Is it possible to drop biology for A2, still get a place while still doing 3 A levels, including chemistry? Again, definitely go and look at the universities you think you're applying to. Some universities want biology as a compulsory subject, whilst others will say biology or chemistry. So if they say biology or chemistry, then you can drop biology. But if you're looking at applying to universities that want them both, then yeah, that's something for you to think about. Okay. Is there an easy equation for abstract reasoning questions? So abstract reasoning questions, there's a thing called scans. So shape, color, arrangement, number, size. So think of those things, and in terms of the patterns, see how they would fit into those 5 categories. So tips to make your application personal statement stand out. Again, April did a bit of a discussion on that, so I can't really add too much on that. Instead of just make it personal. It's a personal statement. A lot of people forget that personal aspect. Really reflect on your experiences. Talk about what is it about you that the university should take you. How are you different? Talk about your hobbies. Talk about the experiences that you saw, how it moved you, and some of the experiences you have that other people may not have. It doesn't have to be super unusual. A lot of people spend too much time making you sound too sophisticated. It doesn't have to be. Mine was very simple. Mine wasn't weird to read or anything like that. It just had a few simple things that I had done, my work experiences, and the things I had learned from that. Okay. Do you have a timetable at university? Yeah, you get a timetable for lectures and stuff. It's not, so university is different. It's more independent. So you'll have a certain number of lectures a week, and sometimes attendance is monitored. Other universities, attendance isn't monitored. So you'll be taking care of your own learning. It's very different from school. You won't be taught stuff, whereas you'll just have a lecture and it's up to you to learn what you're going to learn from it. So you kind of take charge of your own learning. Okay, I think I'll do one more question. Yeah, I'm trying to find one that will be most useful for you all. How do you balance your study life? I think that's a great one. Okay, so that's something that a lot of students worry about when starting medicine. It is all about organization and not leaving your work right to the end, like right to the last minute. So as long as you keep doing your work and prepare as you go along, a lot of the universities, all the big exams are near the end. So start early, revise nicely. It's not, a lot of people say, oh, medicine, you have no time to do anything else. Well, here I am. I've been working for Kaplan for a few years now, so have the other teachers who are answering your questions, and we all do it, and we all manage medicine at the same time, and we're all doing pretty well. And it's just, what it is, if you want to do it, you can do it. So, for the first 2 years, I was working as a phlebotomist whilst doing medicine. I used to work on Saturdays because, I had the free time. I used to, and on top of my 2-hour commute each way, well, not each way, 2-hour commuting from home to uni. So there is definitely time there. It just depends what you prioritize, and gym on top of that. So there are things you can do. it's not something like, it just takes all your time. Yes, during exam times, I don't really have a lot of time to do other things. But that's what I used to think, and here I am. I've got one of the biggest exams of medicine tomorrow, but here I am doing this as well. So you really can make time for the things that are important to you. I also even used to have a YouTube channel at one point, and then doing all the different sporting societies and all sorts of other things. So yeah, definitely you can make time for things, and you can balance your workload and your social life at the same time. It just depends how good you are at organizing. But guys, thank you so much for attending the session. I hope you guys found it useful, and I hope you guys found April's talk really useful. It's amazing. So good luck to you all applying for medicine and dentistry or veterinary sciences, whatever you're applying for. And if you have any questions, do let us know. You can email in to Kaplan. I'll drop my email address as well, actually, if you guys have any contacts for me too. But yeah, good luck with everyone, and have an amazing application, and good luck with your exams, whether you're at uni or anything like that. That is enough for me. Huge thank you to all my assistant teachers who were, or not assistant teachers, they're Kaplan teachers as well, but they were helping me out with this session. So hope you guys found that useful. Good luck, and I will hopefully see you one day in a hospital working alongside you guys.